Lord Ricketts, the former National Security Advisor, has said the claims in this letter are nonsense. Our intelligence links with the US have nothing to do with the EU and would be unaffected by the deal. I think I'd rather believe Lord Ricketts than the Right Honourable Lady.
I'm not asking the House to believe me. I am simply drawing to the attention of the House what former heads of MI6 and defence chiefs have said. It is for the House to weigh up what value they give to those gentlemen's opinion.
And perhaps, Mr. Speaker, it would help if I respond to that remark as well, because I have a great deal of respect for Lord Guthrie and Sir Richard Dearlove, but on this particular issue in this letter, they are wrong. There is nothing in this deal that changes our relationship with NATO, with our US allies as intelligence partners, or indeed with our wider Five Eyes partners. Nothing at all.
First of all, much of that hasn't been decided. It's part of the future political framework. But furthermore, it is for the House and the public watching this debate to decide what weight they give to the opinions of former heads of MI6 and former heads of the defence chiefs. And let me say this. The point I'm making is that it seems to me that the Home Secretary has been a little careless in his assurances around security and the safety of the nation. And it is at least debatable whether this deal gives us the assurance we need.
Thank the Right Honourable Lady for giving way. She mentioned data and adequacy. I'm sure she's well aware that the UK actually leads the world in this area, and we're highly confident that actually we will be adequate, in fact more than adequate, because the EU has followed many of the things we've led rather than the other way round. So rather than spread fear, perhaps you can have confidence that the UK will indeed lead and continue to lead in these areas.
I appreciate that the honourable gentleman is speaking good faith. But I was with other colleagues in Brussels before Christmas, and they were clear there, the key stakeholders on issues of security, that the position we're in at this point, without a security treaty, is highly problematic. It may be at this point we lead the world on data security, but we have to give the type of assurances that the EU will accept if we are to have any chance of continuing cooperation going into the future. Many of the operational treaty functions in these areas, security and the safety of the realm, derive solely from our membership of the European Union. We believe on this side it's the height of irresponsibility to abandon these arrangements without any plan or, in some cases, any possibility of replacing them. And much of this problem arises from the Prime Minister's own red lines. For example, her insistence on removing the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice without providing an alternative. Any warrant needs oversight and the possibility of judicial appeal. The Prime Minister must have known that when she made it a red line, or she was irresponsible if she did not know that. All along, Labour has upheld 6 tests that any deal would have to meet in order for us to vote for it. The 5th of these tests is, does it protect national security and our capacity to tackle cross-border crime? And I put it to the Treasury bench that on the basis of what we know, this deal will not necessarily protect national security and our capacity to tackle cross-border crime. And on that grounds alone, we believe the Prime Minister has failed to meet this test. This deal is not even close. Theresa May and this government have delivered only a hard Brexit on security, justice, police and freedom. And on that basis, we on this side of the House will not be voting for it. But I come to the question of immigration, because all the polling shows us that when we look at why people voted leave, concerns about migration were an important factor. So it's very important with going forward in negotiating Brexit that we deal with these issues in a coherent way, and that we deal with these issues in a fair way. We deal with these issues in a way which is not designed to excite public passions, and we deal with these issues in a way, above all, which is in the best interest of society, the economy, jobs and business. And I'm afraid on this side, we don't believe that currently this is what the government is doing. The government has finally produced an immigration bill of sorts, but what does it say? Actually, it says very little. Front and centre of this bill is a declaration that freedom of movement will be ending, but the government hasn't actually told us what will replace it. This matters because, as I've said, immigration is a key issue. It was an important issue before, during and after the June 2006 referendum, and the Treasury bench may not think that, but millions of our constituents do think that, and millions of our constituents are anxious that we get this issue right. So beyond the purely declaratory ending of freedom of movement, which under the government's plan falls anyway, is it really true that the promised clampdown in net migration is really coming? The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that the White Paper offers no such promise. Instead, it's replete with assurances that businesses large and small will be able to maintain or even increase their access to labour from overseas. There are literally dozens of these assurances. So to all those who voted leave to reduce or even end net migration, there's a possibility that they will be disappointed. We will be debating the immigration bill next week, and we will have a number of questions to the Home Secretary. What has happened?
I'm very grateful to the Shadow Home Secretary giving way. Does she agree with me that when the government says that people voted on the issue of immigration, actually for many people immigration was a proxy for the pressure that 8 years of austerity measures, 6 years at that point, had put on public services, people who felt they couldn't see a GP on time or into hospital due to pressure on the NHS. Does she agree that that's where people felt that somehow immigration had caused concern for them and their families?
I agree with my honourable friend. Very often when people raise concerns about migration, it's a proxy for other concerns. But nonetheless, the government has a responsibility to come forward with proposals on migration that are good for the society, good for business and good for our economy. On the question of EU citizens, the Home Secretary has made a number of assurances about EU citizens, but we've not heard so much about EU citizens and their families. And there can be no question that the process of actually registering over 3 million EU citizens could well be problematic. And on the basis of the immigration nationalities record in the past, there must be some concern.
The Honourable Lady for giving way. She said there's been a lack of clarity around what to do with EU nationals' families, but actually there's been a number of statements by government that have clarified what's the rights that people have to go back to their families in Europe and to bring their spouses and children over. So it's not a lack of clarity, it's merely a lack of reading from the Right Honourable Lady.
It's that tone which has done so much to damage people's good faith in where the government is going on this issue. I have met with lawyers who specialise in these issues. I have met with EU nationals who have concerns around these issues, and there is no question that very many EU nationals still have very real concerns about the process and very real concerns about their families and dependents. And rather than adopt that tone, the honourable gentleman would be better advised to speak to EU nationals and find out their concerns for himself.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. I have spoken to my constituents, a number of whom are EU nationals. I have fought to get them passports. I've made sure their rights are heard. I hear them every single week. I've had people in tears in my office, and because of the clarity of information given, I'm able to help the constituents and fight for their rights and secure their place in the United Kingdom. The information is there. I want a quality debate. So do our constituents. So let's stick to the fact, not the fiction.
I'm glad the honourable gentleman is keeping up with his casework, but if he talks to organisations that represent EU nationals as a whole, if he talks to lawyers nationally who deal with these issues, he would know there is still too much that is not resolved. Above all, what is not resolved is the capacity of the Immigration Nationality Department to effectively process over 3 million EU nationals. And the
Will she give way here? Will she give way? I thank the Right Honourable Lady for giving way. I just wanted to reassure her that, as she will know, the EU Settled Status Scheme has been in its private beta testing. We've completed both Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 3 is going to open on the 21st of this month. And it's absolutely because we want to make sure that it works for the individuals, that we can give them the reassurance that we need, that before we require to have the system open, and in every major IT programme, as the Right Honourable Gentleman will know too well, it's much better to go through a testing process than launching it straight away. And I just want to reassure the Right Honourable Lady, in case she'd missed it, that's exactly what we're doing.
I'm aware of the testing process. I'm aware of the issues that have arisen. I'm also aware that the testing process has involved people who have volunteered to take part. The challenge will arise when the mass of EU migrants choose to go through that process. And I will remind the Honourable Lady in the months to come about her complacency about her system.
Would my right honourable friend give way? I'm most grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way. Can I just assure her, Mr. Speaker, that I'll speak to her with respect and not with the patronising tone of other ministers for immigration. But further to these points, particularly from the member for Ockham and South Perthshire, every single statement that was made by the government was contradicted by a further statement from the government, either in this House or outside in the press, on the way that their proposal was going to be implemented. So if there was any confusion in the minds of EU citizens here, was it not the problem that was caused actually by the ministers themselves, contradicting themselves?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. Yes, one of the problems was ministers actually contradicting themselves. But I repeat, in the months to come, I will be reminding the minister about her complacency about this system. And I'd remind her also, this is not just a matter for toing and froing in the House of Commons. This is people's lives, and this is people's families, and this is their security. And also, it is business. It is concerned about what is going to happen to valued employees. So we need to move beyond point scoring, and we need to address the people who will suffer if this system doesn't function.
Order, just before the Honourable Lady takes the intervention, there's quite a lot of chuntering from a sedentary position going on. One honourable member who's been here 3.5 years, and I know regularly auditions for the status of senior member of the House, Well, he can shake his head, but I'm telling him what his behaviour conveys to me. He's normally a good-natured fellow, but he's chuntering too much. His role, if he's a PPS, I think, is to fetch and carry notes and to nod in the appropriate places. He should remain silent. No, but...
Yes, that was enough.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On this issue of the people affected, is it not true that there's already a 300,000 backlog at the Home Office of people waiting for decisions before EU citizens are even added to that queue? Is it not also a fact that the Prime Minister accused EU citizens working and contributing to our country of queue jumping? And isn't it in cheerleading the end of freedom of movement, is the government not sticking two fingers up at the 60 million British people who wish to travel and work in the 27 other EU member states who will lose out under this government's plans?
Well done, Neil. I'd like to thank my honourable friend for his intervention. And as he said, there is already a backlog of people wishing to enter your beta testing system. If I were the Treasury bench, I would be a little more humble about the possibilities for their system. Because, as I've said, this is real people's lives, and it's also the concern of business, that the concerns about how this system will actually work.
You shouldn't get away with it.
Do you know, in moving to close my remarks, let me say this. In my lifetime, I have seen issues around migration and thinking and the public debate around migration largely move forward. It says something for that forward movement that the two people facing each other across the dispatch box this morning are both the children of migrants, albeit coming from diametrically opposed political positions. The concern about a heated and toxic debate around Brexit and migration is that we might go backwards in terms of the general debate, not go forward. And people who have seen some of the scenes outside the House of Commons this week and in past weeks would do well to be concerned about the possibility of going backwards. We have seen some very unpleasant scenes, very unpleasant attacks on members of Parliament going about their business, on journalists. Even a black policeman was abused by these Brexit campaigners. It is important that we are all mindful that it's important to have a debate which moves forward, that doesn't look back, that doesn't excite passions, and which at all times acknowledges the important role that migration has played in this country and hopefully will continue to play in building this country. So we need, not in an effort to pander to certain elements of the British electorate, we need in this House at least to maintain a respectful and a serious debate around issues of migration. On the question of EU migrants, I repeat, from what we know about the Windrush and from what many of us know from dealing with the Immigration National Department in our individual advice surgeries and with our individual caseloads, there has to be doubt about the capacity of the Immigration Nationality Department to process over 3 million people speedily and efficiently. On the question of security and the safety of the realm, I have reminded the House of the concerns there are about this, both amongst stakeholders, former heads of MI6 and defence chiefs, but also in Brussels. I don't know if members opposite have had the occasion to go to Brussels and talk to stakeholders and talk to some of our commissioners. If they had done that, they would be aware of the very real concern. So whether it's about migration, whether it's about EU migrants, whether it's about safety and security, we do not believe that this deal meets the tests we have set out. We regret the fact that there's been such a huge break in this debate, But we resume the debate, and we are saying, on this side of the House, that we will not be voting for this deal. It is wholly dishonest to say it's either this deal or nothing. Wholly dishonest. We will not be voting for this deal. We believe the country deserves better. We believe it doesn't engage with the very serious issues around security and migration that it needs to. And we will be going through the lobby to vote it down. I only hope that the Treasury bench have a plan B.
Thank you.